Hello friends and subscribers. Well, it's my first video of 2024 and I'm going to start with a ranking of the albums from Electric Light Orchestra, or E.L.O. for short. Such a great band. I've been a fan of them for almost 10 years, and yeah, Jeff Lynne is just he's a musical genius. He's right up there with Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys. So I'm only ranking studio albums here, no live albums or compilations, no soundtracks. I'm not including the Xanadu soundtrack because there's Olivia Newton-John on there as well, so it's not all E.L.O. I'm also not including E.L.O. Part 2, which is what they did after they broke up. All the other members formed a spin-off group, but without Jeff Lynne. They made a couple of albums, but yeah, I'm only including their 14 studio albums, because I am also including the Jeff Lynne's E.L.O., which are basically Jeff Lynne solo albums, but they're still under the name E.L.O., so I'm including them as well. So yeah, this ranking is just based on my own opinion. It's how I feel about these albums, completely subjective. We all hear these things differently, so if you'd like to give your ranking of these albums in the comments below, then please do. So without any further hesitation, let's start. So coming in last is Balance of Power. This came out in 1986, and yeah, I've just never been able to get into this album. This is the last album they did for the next 15 years, and yeah, I'm really just not that keen on this one, to be honest. I don't like the 80s production. Every song on here just has synthesizers and drum machines. There's not really a lot of guitar on here, and it also lacks the orchestrations. The violins and the cellos. They are sorely missed on here. Yeah, I just don't get on with this album at all. If I had to pick one decent song, it'd probably be Calling America, but even that's not particularly a great song. Yeah, I just don't get along with this. Don't even know why I own it, to be honest. I'll probably give it away. I'm sure this album does have its fans. If you like the album, more power to you. But I don't. So yeah, number 14. Okay, number 13 is From Out of Nowhere. So this was the most recent E.L.O. album. This came out in 2019, I do believe. So this was released under the Jeff Lynne's E.L.O. So it's really just Jeff Lynne. It's basically a solo album, but it's still under the E.L.O. name. So, and even when you go on Wikipedia, it says it's E.L.O.'s 13th studio album. So I'm including it. Obviously, I don't have it. I might pick it up eventually. I mean, it's not a bad album. It's pretty decent. It's definitely a lot better than Balance of Power. It is listenable compared to that. It's just it just doesn't really grab my attention like other E.L.O. albums do. But yeah, it's not bad by any means. The title track is pretty decent. There's also Sci-Fi Woman is pretty cool as well. I don't mind that. Time of Our Life. There's decent songs on here. I don't mind listening to this album, but yeah, it's just nothing special as far as I'm concerned. So that's why it's number 13 for me. And number 12 is the album that came before that, Alone in the Universe. This was released in 2015. It's also under Jeff Lynne's E.L.O. I like the lenticular cover on this CD. Again, not a bad album. It's, you know, When I Was a Boy is a pretty decent song. The title track's pretty good. Dirty to the Bone is okay. But one of the tracks on here, which wasn't actually part of the album, it's one of the bonus tracks on this CD. It's called Fault Line. That's a really good song. I think it should have been part of the actual album. But yeah, I don't listen to this that much, to be honest. But I don't mind sticking it on from time to time. So yeah, so number 11 is Secret Messages. This was released in 1983. This album does have its fans. I'm personally not the biggest fan of this album. You know, I've never really fully got into this one, but I don't hate it. It's definitely better than Balance of Power. I personally do think that E.L.O. in the 80s, they kind of lost their way a little bit. But, you know, it's got Rock and Roll is King. I do dig that track. It's pretty cheesy, but I do quite dig it. But the rest of it's okay, but I'm not a huge fan of it. But, you know, if you're a fan of this album, I'm pleased for you. So yeah, that was number 11. Number 10 is Time. This came out in 1981, so it's their first 80s album. And yeah, it's in a cardboard sleeve, and that's because it's part of the original Album Classics box set. Yeah, so this is another album that it certainly does have its fans, but yeah, this is another album I've never fully gravitated towards. Although it does have Hold On Tight, which is great. I love Hold On Tight, and Lights Go Down I think's pretty good as well. The rest of it is fine, but yeah, like I say, I'm not the biggest fan of 80s E.L.O. But yeah, it's not bad by any means. And is it number 9? Yes. Just checking that I've. Yeah, it is number 9. So number 9 is Zoom. So this came out in 2001. So this was their first album in 15 years, and I quite dig this actually. This was kind of this is definitely a really good comeback album. I mean, it does lack the orchestration, but there's some really good rockers on here. You got All Right, All She Wanted. You know, it's not an album that I put on very often, but yeah, I think it's a pretty solid album. It technically is the first Jeff Lynne's E.L.O. album, because I think he's the only original member that's on here. But it's still just under E.L.O. and not Jeff Lynne's E.L.O. But yeah, I do quite like this actually. I like the cover as well. You know. So, number 8. It's El Dorado. This came out in 1974. You know, an album that's seen as a classic by many. I don't like this album as much as most E.L.O. fans do, but I do like it. I wasn't really the biggest fan of it when I first heard it. You know, although the track "Can't Get It Out of My Head" is great. I've always loved that track, but the rest of the album I never used to be a fan of until I re-listened to it again recently, and it's grown on me. It is a good album, but it's not one of my favourites. Number 7, On the Third Day. So their third album, released in 1973. Good album. It has Showdown, which it wasn't actually on the UK release of the album, but it was on the American release. So yeah, I think this is the American track listing, which I prefer because Showdown is a great song. It's probably one of my favourites on this album, so I'm glad that it's on here. And Ma 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 Belle is great. It's a great rock song. Oh No, Not Susan. Solid album. You know, I definitely consider 70s E.L.O. to be the best. Number 6. Face the Music. Released in 1975. Another album that's seen as a classic by many E.L.O. fans. And yeah, it is a classic, but I don't like it nearly as, quite as much as most fans do, but I do like this album. It's got Strange Magic, one of my favourite E.L.O. songs, Evil Woman, Poker. Really, really good album. But it's number 6. And number 5 is their debut album from 1971. I think in the UK it was just called The Electric Light Orchestra, but I think in America it was called No Answer. And yeah, I think it's a really strong debut album. This was when Roy Wood was still in the band, because Roy Wood was originally from The Move, and then he left E.L.O. to form Wizard. But yeah, he sings some of the tracks on here. And yeah, best song on here is the 10-538 Overture. Amazing. Look at Me Now is great. Nelly Takes Her Bow. Mr. Radio. There's not a lot of guitar on this album. It's mainly like violins and cellos. Except the Overture has guitar on it, but yeah, but they obviously hadn't quite found themselves as a band yet. But a strong debut album. And number 4, I don't have this one, but it's their second album, E.L.O. 2, which came out, I believe it was 1973. And yeah, I really like this. Yeah, I've got to admit, this is a good album. I do like this one. It's got a cover of Roll Over Beethoven, which I like it. I mean, my favourite version of Roll Over Beethoven is the Beatles version, which they did it on their second album. And you've also got In Old England Town, which I really like. It kind of has a Pink Floyd vibe to it in some way. I mean, this came out the same year as Dark Side of the Moon. Yeah, and there's not really that many songs on here. I think there's only like 5 tracks on here. So this is probably their most progressive album. But yeah, I do like E.L.O. too, and I don't have it yet, but I plan to get it eventually. And now we're into the top 3. Number 3 is Discovery, released in 1979. I love this album. I think it's quite underrated as an album. I kind of consider it to be their last great album. You know, as I've said, I'm not a fan of 80s E.L.O. that much, apart from a few songs. But yeah, some great stuff on here. Shine a Little Love, Confusion is one of my favourite E.L.O. songs. Diary of a Horace Wimp, Last Train to London, Don't Bring Me Down. Great album. Just 2 left. Number 2, New World Record, 1976. This came out. A lot of fans would rank this as their favourite, and yeah, I can see why. But it's my second favourite, just because my number 1 I just like a lot more. But there's some great songs. Tightrope is great. Telephone Line, Rockeria, Living Thing, Do Ya. A fantastic album. So my number 1 is Out of the Blue, released in 1977. This was the album that got me into E.L.O. This was the first album by them that I heard, and I loved it straight away. So yeah, and this was originally released as a double album when it came out, but the whole album is on one CD. I love that cover as well. Such an iconic cover, that spaceship. I think because Star Wars came out this year, I think this was inspired by Star Wars. I could be wrong, but it's a bit of a coincidence though. But there's so many great songs. Turn to Stone, It's Over, Sweet Talking Woman, Across the Border, Night in the City, Starlight, Believe Me Now, Stepping Out, and then you've got the Concerto for a Rainy Day. You have Standing in the Rain, Big Wheels, Summer and Lightning, and the excellent Mr. Blue Sky. I don't care how many times it's been played. It's a masterpiece. Sweet is the Night is great. Birmingham Blues. You know, the whole album's great, but I think the only track on here I'm not the biggest fan of is the instrumental track, The Whale. It's not bad. It's just one that it's just a bit of filler for me. I usually skip it when I play the album, but yeah, it's not bad by any means. But it doesn't take away from the excellence of this album. So yeah, and if I was going to recommend any E.L.O. album to anyone who hasn't heard E.L.O. before, this would be the one. So there you have it. That's my ranking of the E.L.O. albums. And I hope you enjoyed this ranking. Give it a thumbs up if you did. Subscribe for more content. Click the bell so that you don't miss out on a single upload. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you again in the next video. Take care.